Hi, I'm Brian with BibleStudying.net, and we're going to continue our discussion of Gnosticism and how it fits in with these same four doctrinal points that we've been using to categorize various religions in both the East, the Far East, and also in Europe as being the same mystical religion, just different denominations of it. And so if we look at reincarnation, the first most important point to make concerning Gnosticism is that Gnosticism is related to the doctrines of Platonism in many, many ways. And so we already know that Plato believed and Neoplatonism believed in reincarnation. And based on this, we could infer very strongly that Gnosticism does as well. Britannica, for example, states in its article on Gnosticism that it's related to the origins of Gnostic worldview have been sought by scholars in the dualism of Iranian religion and the allegorical idealism of the Middle Platonic philosophers, very related to Platonism. Again, Britannica goes on to say that sometimes Gnosticism comes very near to the views of Middle Platonism. So there's good reason to believe that because Plato believed in the idea of reincarnation, that the Gnostics did as well. And we do have historical evidence for that. For example, Irenaeus, who we mentioned earlier in the series, is an early Christian writer. He's discipled by Polycarp, who's discipled by John the Apostle, who of course was taught by Jesus Christ himself. And Irenaeus writes a large volume, which for the longest time was one of our few sources for understanding ancient Gnosticism until recent discoveries were made of ancient Gnostic documents. Turns out, when we compared the recent discoveries of the actual Gnostic documents to what Irenaeus had to say, he was very accurate. And one of the things that Irenaeus has to say here is that the Gnostics did indeed believe in the idea of reincarnation. He states here in his book, his second book of his massive work called Against Heresies, in chapter 33, that we may subvert their doctrine as to the transmigration from body to body. So he's about to argue against the Gnostic understanding of transmigration of souls from one body to another. So definitely, for these reasons and because of its basic outgrowths from Platonism and common traits with Platonism, we can say that Gnosticism in its ancient form believed in reincarnation. What about their definition of salvation? Well, according to Merriam-Webster's, Gnosticism distinguished by the conviction that matter is evil and that emancipation comes through gnosis. Well, if matter is evil, you want to be freed from it or emancipated from it, you're going to be escaping matter. You're going to be escaping existence in this physical reality. According to the Columbia Encyclopedia, the Gnostic view, the heavenly pleroma was the center of divine life. They interpreted Jesus as an intermediary eternal being that was sent from this center of divine life to restore the lost knowledge of humanity's divine origin, and they held secret formulas would restore them to the heavenly abode upon death. And so the idea here is that at death you would escape from reincarnation effectively and go back to live in the heavenly abode, not continue to live in evil matter here in this physical world. And so definitely we can categorize it, Gnosticism as having the same view of salvation as escape from the physical world that we've seen in all these other religious views. Included with Gnosticism and Mandaeanism, we can also talk about Manichaeism and Manichaeism, I should say. Britannica says concerning Manichaeism that at its core, Manichaeism was a type of Gnosticism, a dualistic religion that offered salvation through special knowledge of spiritual truth. So we don't need to go point by point concerning Manichaeism. We already know from its similarities to Gnosticism that it falls into the same category with the same view of these particular doctrinal points. We're on good solid ground when we can make that conclusion. Next, I want to talk about Shinto, which is now coming to us from Japan. And let's talk about the mystical path according to Shinto. What does Shinto have to say on this topic of mysticism? Britannica says that at the core of Shinto beliefs are the mysterious creating and harmonizing power of kami. And so definitely they're having this concept of kami as harmonizing and unifying power of kami. And then it says that the nature of kami cannot be fully explained in words because kami transcends the cognitive faculty of man. So if kami transcends the cognitive faculty, the thinking faculties of men, how do you have any knowledge or experience of kami? In the end, the concept here is, as Britannica concludes, that you understand kami through faith. And so the idea basically here is a blind faith. It doesn't interact with your intuitive, or I should say it doesn't interact with your cognitive or thinking processes. It's something that you experience on a faith that is entirely different from that, a sort of blind or mystical faith, as we've talked about in other studies, particularly our epistemology study. Well, what about the idea of the one that is all? What does What does Shinto have to say on that? Well, according to, again, Britannica.com, at a certain point in time, we have what we call Issei or Watari Shinto, and this is the first theoretical school of anti-Buddhistic Shinto, because remember, a large part of what is modern Shinto has been heavily influenced by Buddhism and Taoism, and so their writings didn't even come about until after a massive inflow of Buddhist and Taoist ideologies into Japan, so it's very difficult to separate Shinto's religious views from Buddhist and Taoist influence, and on that level we can definitely categorize Shinto as falling within these basic mystical worldviews that are basically denominations of a larger mystical global worldview. But there were attempts, such as Issei or Watari Shinto, to remove the Buddhist elements. According to Britannica, it attempted to exclude Buddhist accretions and tried to formulate a pure Japanese version. But Watari Shinto appeared during the 13th century as a reaction against Shinto-Buddhist amalgamation. However, despite its attempts to remove Buddhist influence, Britannica says the following, that the Watari Shinto believed in the idea of Kantan, or chaos, and Kizen, non-being, and that the basic kami of the universe for Watari Shinto was regarded as the basis of all beings, including Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, including Buddhas. So you see, even though they're trying to remove Buddhist influence, they're still viewing the world in terms of a basic universal kami that's regarded as the basis of all beings, very much in line with the one that is all. In addition, the idea is that prayers were emphasized as the mean by which to be united with kami. And I would suppose ultimately the basic kami of the universe as well, that is the basis of all beings. Lastly, Britannica says that Watari Shinto has also showed some Taoist influence. Its fundamental kami, the source of all things and beings in the universe in particular, is shared with the Taoist concepts. It states that the ideal of inner purification was a mysterious state of mind in which one worshipped the kami that lived in one's own heart. Very much sounds like what we saw with Taoism, where in a particular state of consciousness within yourself you can attain this mystical union with the ultimate underlying kami of the entire universe. So very much mystical, very much an idea of the one that is all. Shinto believes, according to Britannica, that man is considered to have a primarily divine nature, so this potential idea of us being consubstantial with the Godhead that we saw in Gnosticism is there as well. And then Britannica states that the Tai Chi, the supreme ultimate concept of Neo-Confucianism, was regarded as identical to the first kami, and that's what they say in their article on Shinto. But Britannica does say that the kami, like other creatures, were said to be suffering because they were unable to escape the endless cycle of transmigration, and help was therefore offered to the kami in the form of the Buddhist disciplines. And the question of escape from the physical world as part of salvation, it definitely seems like Shinto falls into that category based on this last quote, with the idea of Buddhist discipline being offered not just to people but to the kami in order to escape the transmigration of souls. And of course that reference to transmigration there would clearly identify Shinto, at least in its modern Buddhist forms, as being a religion that believes in reincarnation. So we end up with proof for both there. And we're getting close to the end of this video, so I'm going to put on pause. We're going to come back and talk in the next video series about Sikhism and how it fits into these same categories.